the new basis for the title, according to the wish of Frederick and Tatiana. So let's try not to spend too much time on the title, but apparently we, like with Trump, there has been a withdrawal of the previous decisions, and we'll do it all over again. Maybe if you want, Arnold, if you want to start in explaining why.
I don't want to prolong the discussion, but we had some talks afterwards, and looking at the title, it has a kind of a negative connotation. It indicates that in the past we did something wrong and we have to do it right. That's, well, Auke, I don't know if you have to jump in, but and I'm not a native speaker. So I asked a native speaker, what do you think about this title? And that was his reaction too. So I'd like to open the floor again to see whether you agree with this or you have a different view. I'm puzzling now to find the right wording, but as I said, I'm not a native speaker. But I would like to see a title where it is more forward-looking, improving, proactive, this kind of elements in it. And I can understand we had the IT in capital, and that somebody said, well, this is nothing to do with internet governance, so make it small letters. I can feel that. And, so the floor is open for any suggestion to improve the title, because we really, as hosts, would like to have a very forward-looking title. I mean, ICANN is using only numbers, huh? Over to you, Chair.
I'm in your hands. So then the new title would be EuroDIG 2019.
I must say, I would find it a little bit puzzling having no title. I mean, we started without a title, then after, don't know, 6 years, five times it came out, a title would be a good idea. And ever since, we always had a title. There were lots of ideas in the room, and it would be hard for me to understand why out of these ideas, nothing can be...
Peace and justice. Peace, justice, and an open and free internet. I didn't hear whether you agree with my interpretation. This could sound like a negative connotation when you see the title, Time to Get It Right. Am I right or wrong?
I think the first thing is we need to, again, take a decision. Do we want to have a specific title, yes or no?
I mean,
once and for all. And then if it's a no, it's a no. If it's a yes, we need to... Because
I think we already discussed that we want to have a title, and we had some arguments about it. But of course, we can vote for it again. But I didn't understand why do you think it's why don't you like the title? Because it's can be interpreted that something went wrong, but look in the press. Look in the press. Something went wrong. It's not something that we invent. It's not. Maybe it's us, maybe it's not us that did something wrong, but the internet didn't go the right way. We have censorship, we have all kind of negative uses. There is something wrong, and we have to get it right now, because otherwise it will have a very negative impact on our society. That's the reason why I think this somehow also negative connotation has a reason.
Thank you. What I discussed over the coffee break is that the way it was spelled could be interpreted like EuroDIG has done something wrong, because it just says it. And we had capitals, IT. And if we look at the whole program, no, IT is not per se internet governance, but it's about cyberbullying, it's about harm online, it's about internet protocols that are not being implemented, it's about smart cities and data. So it is about getting things right, and IT, information technology, is the overarching theme of, or whatever wording that's usually used in this. So I thought it was a perfect title, of course with a little prefix, the shift thing in front, but I understand that it's not happening.
So can I take it that we do not decide not to have a title? That's not really consensual, not to have a title. So we are back into the discussion about a title, just that we depart all from the same. If that's a yes, okay.
Who is for no title? Hands up.
Who is for a title then? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10. This is more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
We'll have a title.
Chris,
And then maybe one thing, what is right is you could read EuroDIG, time to get it right, that EuroDIG has been wrong and we need to get it right, and that's maybe not the message that we would want to send. Chris?
yeah, so I now that that's been spelled out a little more clearly, I think that is a risk, and I think that's probably a problem. I think also, even if we were to take the broader context and say something has gone wrong, you would actually find that not all of the stakeholders involved agreed something had gone wrong or what had gone wrong. I can imagine Google would have a very different idea of what's gone wrong to some of the other participants. But I mean, I think I actually, your earlier comment, I think what I really liked about it was that sense of urgency. So I don't know, I'm just Googling around here. I know there's a photographer who had an idea of the decisive moment. So something like approaching a decisive moment for internet governance or something might, I don't know, I realize I'm throwing new ideas into the mix here, but I think if we're going to
No, but that's fine because
if
we
we're
need
going to
new
have
ideas.
a title, I think we need to, yeah.
So if it is not specific enough, could we just, well, there was the IT, but we are talking about internet, not about IT. What if we write internet, but we just write internet in small letters except for I and T? The first and the last letter in normal letter.
Don't talk without the mic, sorry. Can we have somebody who is bringing the mics around, because otherwise we'll lose too much time? Thank you.
Hello, this is just a suggestion. My name is Nienke, by the way. I'm from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. And I was thinking time for peace and security online. Just a suggestion, maybe it can help us get forward.
Okay. Yeah, no, just in response to what Arnold said, a positive, forward-looking title towards a sustainable digital future, or towards a future we want, or something.
I would suggest just something to add to the urgency, because I think that's a very good component. Something like keeping up with a sustainable digital future, or keeping up with the changing something something. Yeah. Great. That's exactly what I meant. Thank you.
Can we maybe play a little bit with peace and security? So that's what the Hague stands for, because I mean that would be very. But there are also attempts to look into becoming a cybersecurity hotspot, isn't it?
It was, yeah.
That's already something. One-to-one, but we can take the elements if you think that's. The thing is, do you want to highlight one element like security above openness or whatever? Just a question. Maybe again, what is the message that you want to convey? And it should not be a negative message, it should be a positive message, because people don't like negative messages because that's not nice. Okay, we take note. So what is the message that you want to convey?
We're looking for a title which is an umbrella of all the components which you can find in the program. It's dealing with IoT, with security, with what have you. And if you have the title Securing the Connected Future, I think you're forward-looking, and you're also positive in a way that you try to, on the one hand, to make it possible that innovation take place, but on the other hand, also take care of the people, the internet users, who are doing their job and are being well harassed or attacked, and you would like to help them as well, to secure the internet that is an open and free space to work.
We can do this if it's no problem if you repeat something that is already existing, and if you don't have a problem that we highlight the security aspect of all of the discussions. Up to the group.
So, yeah, for
I think that it doesn't refer to cybersecurity. It's just to make sure that the future is connected.
yeah, agree. I just want to say that as well. For me, it's not security. It's just about the connected future.
Okay, so is this it?
Or preserving, I mean, it's an alternative word.
I would maybe another option would be building bridges for a connected future or something like that. If securing is not, even though I also agree that securing is not security, but maybe building bridges might be a normative kind of forward-looking or cooperative way of framing it.
The question is, if we looked at what we discussed earlier, the challenge is not that the future will be connected. From what I perceive, the challenge is how will life be in a connected future? So it's not to secure the connected future, it's probably more securing quality of life and some other values in a connected future. That would be my point that I would make. Valentina, and then Uriye. Or Uriye because you have the mic, and then Valentina. And then Adam, if you're hiding behind a pillar, I cannot see you. I'm sorry.
I'm holding up the pillar. Securing a connected world. Because to my mind, that's what we are really worried about. Thank you.
I just like two elements.
I mean, I like many, but particularly two elements in all this. One is building, because it gives you the idea of community, of positive, of we're doing something all together, etc., etc., etc. And the other one was sustainable, that someone said at some point, because I think sustainable in a way condense everything. If it's not inclusive, it's not sustainable. If it's not trustable, it's not sustainable. If it's not transparent, it's not sustainable. If it's not green, it's not sustainable. So sustainable means that it has to be all these things if we want to have a future.
But if you use the adjective sustainable, you need to add something to it. Otherwise, something
sustainable connected future, a sustainable, what someone said before, digital future, yeah. Sustainable future.
Sorry, couldn't help this. Okay, sustainable future, digital future.
One of these, yes. Connected work, connected future, they all work, but the two concepts of building and sustainable.
Adam?
Back to the Netherlands theme, peace, justice and rights. Peace, justice and rights, our sustainable future. Peace, justice and rights, our life online. Something like that. Yeah. But I mean, they're both the Netherlands theme and the Den Haag theme. So.
Chris?
Okay. I mean, I feel like we're again coming back to a very generic title. And again, I'm not quite sure what the point of a very generic title is. ICANN meetings don't have titles. Right meetings don't have titles. I mean, are we actually risking making EuroDIG seem less serious because it needs a title every year?
But those are working meetings.
Well, they are, but I mean, if what we're saying is that
Chris,
EuroDIG is not a working meeting,
we
that's
decided 2 times that we need a title. We
know,
can have the discussion once more. Probably the
no.
result may be the same. I'm very sorry.
I get that, I do, well, let me just come back to my original point, which is a generic title doesn't help us, to my mind.
Okay, what are we doing in this very tricky situation? What is the timing of the, should we give this mental break, continue with the rest, and then come back to the title at the end? Do we have this apero offered by the host? Maybe some wine would be helpful.
It might. Can I sort of very...
Chris, and then Frederick, and then...
Well, I just wanted to very briefly point out, and maybe Wout was involved, there was a conference on internet governance last year, which was something about peace and justice and rights. So I think if we use that, we're going to come very close to having the same title as the conference that happened last year, which was not EuroDIG.
So you would want that, or you would rather not want it?
I would rather us not do that. I think that would be very strange.
And that, something else we could do, we could say something like connecting the dots, blah, 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 which is also not very innovative, but it's something that in substance would make sense, but you don't want this either. So next proposal, please.
A short remark. The Dutch international cyber strategy is called building digital bridges. So maybe that's something to keep in mind. If we name it something like that, it might sound like a Dutch initiative too much.
Since there are no new ideas coming, I suggest we leave it at this for the time being and go back to Sandra for the rest of the discussion or the rest of the meeting, and then we'll use a glass of wine or orange juice and see what happens then. Okay? Thank you. Or coffee and cigarettes. I haven't said that, have I?
Okay, so we have 1 hour 45 minutes, and actually there is not too much that we have to accomplish. We can go back to the title, yes. I was asking the breaks for those who are not familiar with the EuroDIG participation process, how it now works in terms of getting to an org team and so on and so forth. And those who are familiar, they probably hear it now for the 5th time, but we have to explain this also to our new communities, how session org teams are formed and what our principles are and how they can get involved even at a later, or how other communities can get involved even at the later stage. Therefore, I would now like to go to our session rules and principles. And here, I try to visualize how an org team, a subject matter expert, a secretariat, how this all works together. So basically, when we have the consolidated program by mid-February, we will send out a call for org teams, and these call for org teams are disseminated over our newsletter. So I really encourage everyone to sign up for our newsletter. They are really not spamming. We are not spamming people. We really disseminate our process information about the newsletter, and we will call for org teams. And it will work in that way that we set up a wiki on the internet, of course, connected to the EuroDIG website. And on this wiki page, you will find a mailing list. And if you subscribe to that mailing list, you are subscribed to the org team, and that's it. And for instance, if you now look at any session, for instance, the one here, the plenary 4, we have a variety of IDs. These are all the IDs that at the moment feed into that plenary. But for someone who did not submit a proposal, this person can still be part of an org team. Because we found out that people in the respective host countries that we visit sometimes find out later in the process that something like EuroDIG get involved at a later stage, and that's possible. They can join the org teams at any time. This has some challenges because the focal point, and that's the one that leads the org team, but that's not the one that takes all the decision. Decision shall be taken in the multi-stakeholder bottom-up environment. If people are constantly joining the org teams, I mean, there are not hundreds joining. Org teams usually have a size between 3 and, let's say, 10 people. And as you know from reality, it's voluntary work on top of the job. So from the 10 people, 3 sometimes are active, or 5. It varies. There are org teams that really do very well. There are org teams that where focal point more or less has to take really all the decision more or less alone because no one is contributing. So all the spectrum is possible. A big org team with a lot of active members and a lot of controversial discussion. A small org team where 2 people are basically organizing a session, but still such a session could be a very interactive session on the spot. There is no black and white, there is no right and wrong, there are many opportunities. The secretariat and the subject matter experts, they will only look that the session principles are followed, that no one is left beside who wants to get involved, that all perspectives are taken into account, and that the org team still keeps the focus of the session that is defined in the draft program. So what the org team does is it cooperates with the secretariat and the SME. It is responsible also, sorry, it's not responsible to submit. I have to correct that because we have the Geneva Internet platform that is doing the reporting for EuroDIG since last year, and this worked very well. But it also has to define the title of the session, and it has to keep the deadlines. And so here are all the things summarized that the org team has to decide on. Each org team gets a session template on the wiki page. Session templates look same all across the wiki, even from last year, so that for easy navigation, people can easily orient in such a wiki. That you always have the same structure of people involved, of resources that are linked, and so on and so forth. So the wiki is the main tool for collaboration, and therefore it's really, really important that all the session infos are really published on the wiki. Even those informations like meeting minutes from teleconferences or proposals for subtopics, that they are really published on the wiki, because if someone joins the org team later, they must have a chance to catch up, because then the focal point can say, you want to join the org team, please go through the wiki, see what's there, and then catch up and take it from there, so that you don't reinvent the discussion all the time and running in circles. Is that clear? Are there questions? Arnold and Wout?
The focal point is the SME, or no, not?
Good question. The SMEs are monitoring, or monitoring maybe is a harsh word. For instance, Tanya, she is looking into 3 sessions, a plenary and 2 workshops. She is not organizing them, but she's there with her expertise, and she is looking that session principles are followed. The focal point instead is the leader of this org team. And here, this is a process that's not so democratic. We are not doing an open call for focal points, but we reach out to those who either made the strongest proposal, which goes very much into the direction the session should focus on, or the subject matter experts, they have already an idea who could be the focal point from this group of people. Sometimes they know each other, but also what happens, and happy that Nadia is here, we don't want to have the same people organizing the sessions every year. So last year we were really brave. We reached out to 2 or 3 people. Nadia was one, Jörn was one. No one knew them. No subject matter expert knew them, not the secretariat knew them. They were totally new. They got responsibility to organize a plenary, and it went extremely well. They did such a great job. There was another one not in the room, but now Jörn is here, Nadia is here, so this really worked. We got involved new people because we trusted them. We handed them over responsibility. So this is also something that EuroDIG stands for. We take the risk of involving people that we don't know. And if it goes wrong, then we will find a solution together with the subject matter expert. We were also prepared to do this. There were other sessions where a focal point in the past did not deliver. We will find a solution. We sometimes also skip a session. If there is no org team, if there is no leader, and if it turns out that there is no interest in organizing this session, so why the hell organizing it then? Then we skip it. Arno, you had a question?
Next slide, if you can show us again the next slide. Yes, on that one. You said the focal point is not responsible to submit a report. Is that correct? Yeah. Because Diplo is doing that. Yeah. And then you look at the organization team agrees on a reporter. So that should not be...
That should be updated. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And by the way, Zorina was the one organizing the Geneva Internet Platform reporters last year, so they have a bunch of people, also people that are reporting for the IGF. Maybe Zorina, you would like to explain how that works? It worked well. We had some experiences that we will learn from, but yeah, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Sandra. Yes, at the Geneva Internet Platform, there is a team of trained rapporteurs. As Sandra said, they do reporting from meetings like the IGF, the WSIS Forum, sometimes other events happening in Geneva. And that's what we used last year for the EuroDIG reporting. I don't remember how many we had, I think 5 or 6 rapporteurs. Anyway, they go around sessions and they do write the report, which at the end of the day is published on the Geneva Internet Platform, the Digital Watch, and then the messages, the usual EuroDIG messages, go on the EuroDIG wiki. As Sandra said, we had some experiences last year. We've learned there needs to be a better communication between the Geneva Internet Platform rapporteurs and the people organizing the sessions. They know in advance, so there are no miscommunications at the point when the messages have to be read, but we have learned from those experiences, and I guess this year we will be doing much better if we continue with this approach. Questions, suggestions, happy to always learn from other people. Thank you.
To be honest, working with the Geneva Internet Platform was for the Secretariat really made many things easier, because sometimes we really were running after the reports. Our aim is to get the reports online within 24 hours after, or 48 hours after the session. Those who submitted in that time, this was fine, but if people didn't submit within 1 week, we were running after those messages for a month. And this really made it difficult for us in the past to draft the messages that we would like to submit. Tanya, you have a comment or question?
Thank you very much. Let me be frank here, as former focal point, a subject matter expert. Normally, we were looking for the volunteers for the reporting at the organizing team. And sometimes there were people who barely spoke English, who couldn't write, who couldn't summarize. And then you know it, but you cannot tell people off. So and I'm not the only one who had this problem. And then you or focal point have to rewrite, but messages have to be agreed. So this is another angle to this, and sorry for being that frank, but it did exist, this problem, not only choosing the reporter, but having people who were not fit for purpose. So this Geneva Internet Platform was just really a lifesaver in this case.
Absolutely, Tanya, thank you. Any other question, Christina?
I just have a small comment. I think it was really well done last year when we did the reports and the messages directly in the room, because it really allowed everyone to agree on it directly. It's much more transparent than, for example, the IGF reporting. And it also makes the work done straight away, and everyone can agree in the room on the messages. So I think that's really a good way to work.
Yeah, that's also one point, that we present the messages or the short report in bullet points at the end of each session. This is the way they go into the brochure of messages, and we'll submit it to policymakers or IGF and so on. Comments, questions, others? Oh, yeah.
You mentioned the telephone calls that are going to the wiki. Is there a platform within EuroDIG to use when you need to have a session?
The EuroDIG Secretariat can help to set up a Zoom meeting where you can even see each other. But some organizations prefer their own system. That's fine with us. One thing, the Secretariat and the subject matter experts, they are also subscribed to the mailing list, and all the communication about the session should be on the mailing list, so that others that are joining later can look into the archive, what has been discussed, and that also SMEs and Secretariat can see the status of the session planning process. Okay. Olivier? By the way, if some questions come up, of course the Secretariat is always there to be contacted by email, and we can explain again. And then for the focal points, there will be also a briefing call where we go into detail how to organize the session. Olivier?
Yes, Sandra, I think you should also mention that, of course, you know, the Secretariat keeps a very close watch with regards to the progress that is going on. And if nothing appears on the wiki, because the wiki is the primary location to show all of the updates and so on. If nothing happens on there, then you can bet that the Secretariat will start running after the organizing team and the lead on this. And I don't know if there have been some cases in the past when the Secretariat has had to take action and send some people in to actually get the thing moving, rather or even document it. Because one of the important things here is that the whole process has to be open and has to be documented. For everyone to be able to take part in it. One of the big problems is that sometimes you get people that have a very definite idea of what they want to do, and they just start running forward 2 or 3 people at a time, and then everyone else starts going like, wait a minute, these people are capturing the process as such. So we're very careful about that, and the Secretariat has a mandate to look very closely at what's going on, including the SMEs as well.
By the way, one experience or experiment actually that we made last year, there was also one session, very good proposal, but the person who proposed it said already, I don't have the capacity to organize this session and to set up an org team. However, we knew that this person was very capable, so we said we do an experiment. We just have the topic, the title, you prepare nothing, you are there to be the moderator, and it's a unconference style session. And it worked, it was a good session. Of course, you cannot do with all the sessions, but you can do it once a day, that you really take the risk of not preparing something, just having a concept in mind and then let the people in the room act and discuss. And this might work for some topics, but of course not for all. So we are pretty much open into all direction, and we also have understanding for being not able to taking the leadership and the workload. So we will always try to find a way that works for everyone. Tanja?
Yes, thank you. I know that EuroDIG, further to what Olivier said, I know that EuroDIG frequently has been criticized for having no information about sessions on the wiki page. And I think that this is something for us, subject matter people, to keep in mind and to push for this. And I agree with Olivier that there are sometimes attempts to capture the sessions. I had them, I witnessed them, and this is again up to us to stop this. And of course, on conference style, and we had to intervene several times in the past when we see that nothing has been done on the session, but the topic is still interesting and should be on the agenda. Then of course subject matter expert or someone else has to take over and just organize, and this is what we are there for.
Exactly. Any other comments, questions? Adam?
A long time ago, the Asia Pacific Regional IGF had a similar sort of problem, and they started basically monthly calls where they just monitored progress. So you have the subject matter experts and the board and the sort of leadership that Thomas alluded to at the beginning, and then people join, and you as chair, Sandra, or whoever it would be, it's just that sort of regular updating of things encourages people to do the work that they promised to do. So I'm not trying to add a layer of bureaucracy, but it's more just a functional sort of, keeping people, reminding them of dates. Oh, I've got a call next Thursday. I'd better update the wiki page because I've got a call next Thursday. Otherwise, my colleagues and friends will laugh at me for not having done what I promised to do. And that, that kind of incentive tends to work in volunteer world. So, and it takes the onus off the subject matter experts to act as, hall monitors and bully people. So might be a way of doing it.
I agree, absolutely. Something to think about. Okay, then I will move on. Session principles. I mentioned that already, and one thing you should know is if you have an event on day 0, you are not obliged to follow the session principles. You can do whatever you want. You can dance on the table if you think that's the right approach for your session. If you are instead having a session or are involved in a session within the 2 days of the main EuroDIG, then you have to follow these session principles. Some of them are well known from the IGF, but we have extended a little bit more. So we agree to focus on the issues on the European agenda. That means if proposals coming outside of Europe, we can of course consider them, and we should understand Europe as something that is not isolated in the world. But we will, of course, not look into the issues that are happening in Africa in terms of connectivity. That's not the European Forum for. We would like to avoid a duplication or just more of the same. It has been said already. We have issues that are continuing, like media. It might, on a first glance, look as we are doing the same every year, but no, we are actually evolving. But on the other hand, if a session has been or a topic has been in last year, there is not much progress, we will not do the same thing again. And here, the continuation of subject matter experts is a good and really helpful thing in this regard, because they have the overview how the discussion evolved over the years. If we would have a new team every year, we would probably lose that institutional knowledge. Avoid seminar-style presentation or PowerPoints. I think that's clear. Meanwhile, of course, on day 0 session, you can do this, but in a workshop or a plenary, we don't have 5 speakers with 5 slide decks, each 20 pages. We are not going to do this. We want to have a dialogue. DIG stands for dialogue in this respect. One thing that is every time we are struggling with this, you will probably all agree, if you have too many speakers, there is no time to include the audience. But every year we have panels popping up with 5, 6, or even more people, and we have to force the focal point. There won't be more chairs on stage. You won't get 6 chairs for your panelists. They really have to stick to 3 or 4 key participants, and then open up for the audience. There is a difference between a workshop and a plenary, and we would like to really have the workshop organized as a workshop and not necessarily with a small plenary or with a small speaker line. A workshop, people sit in a circle or sit on the floor even, or are standing up. A workshop is something interactive. A plenary is something for more formal, where you have a stage and people sitting on stage. But we really have an emphasis on having a workshop, and a plenary, and not a workshop being a small plenary. That's really important for the focal points to understand, because all the time it happens that focal points come up. Yeah, but my panel for the workshop. No, you shouldn't have a panel for your workshop. You might have key participants in the room that can add to the discussion. If you start with a panel, you will lose the audience right from the start, and that's something that we would like to avoid. Self-promotion of speaker slots happens also in the past all the time. Big organizations come, where can I place my, I don't know, policy, CEO, whatsoever. It's not about placing your people. Of course, we want to have the high-level people, but they should then also contribute to the discussion beforehand. And if not in person because they are too senior, then at least through an assistant. Because what we would really like to avoid, that is people are joining 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there, just going from one session to the other, not really contributing to the discussion, just saying what they say everywhere, reiterating themselves, and not really contributing. Still happens, but this is something org teams really have to look at. Stakeholder balance, geographical, I don't think I have to elaborate on that. Statements should be punchy and provocative. We don't want to have speakers speaking all the time. 5 minutes per person, that's really a lot. Could be even less. Jon, you have a comment on this?
Well, last year I enjoyed very much. It was a great experience. There were two things with last minute kind of self-placement. It was one was from the sponsors, and second was from the European Commission. And of course, we want the European Commission to be on board, but we want them to that we can plan it in. And otherwise, we will, well, we don't want to chase anybody that we already committed from the panel. And it would be nice to have confirmation a bit before, even if there might be a replacement in case something unplanned happened, so that things can be planned.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And the sponsor placement, that was really an issue, but Georgia is another country, it's a different culture. We had to deal with it, unfortunately. We were not happy about it, but sometimes you have to compromise, because it was very important for the Georgian to get that sponsor in. So I was putting pressure on Jon to put that person into it. Was really a bad situation, but finally we kind of managed, and the sponsor was not the worst choice finally. Okay, then include remote participants. That's also easy. By the way, the EuroDIG since last year has a part of the program where we train the young people as remote moderators. So they will be incorporated in the org teams as remote moderators and have a role apart from the other roles. They are, of course, not, we don't want to hinder them to take any other role, but for remote participation, we definitely need the young people. And then, as said already, publish all the information about your session on the wiki. Once we have the focal points, we will have a briefing call. We will go more into detail, explain the wiki and all that. Don't worry about this, but these are our principles. Okay, there's the overarching theme again. And then one thing I'm not sure if we still have the energy to discuss and decide on this is the intersessional work of the NRIs. And I would like to take the temperature in the room. How do you feel in terms of continuing a discussion about this issue? Or if you would say we continue the discussion on the NRI mailing list. who is in favor of discussing intersessional work? Okay, other opinions? Okay. So it was said already that we really try to find ways of bridging from Berlin to Paris, from Paris to Berlin. EuroDIG is in the middle of the year. We have a good opportunity to recap what has been discussed in Paris, what is in the margin, what is popping up for Berlin. And one thing that should help us to have a mid-year assessment is this digital Outlook Europe. We ask our partner organization to explain their focus, and within this when we are halfway through the year, we will look into that and see if these things that are on the focus of our partners have been discussed at EuroDIG, and how they what the messages are that could help answering their questions or that could contribute to their project. So there are some partners who have not yet contributed to. We hope that now, by seeing what we were planning, that other partners might join this digital Outlook too. And this is actually one thing how we would like to initiate a process that is not only organizing an event, having the event, reporting on it, and that's it, but we would really like to have an ongoing process throughout the year and analyze our key element in this respect. And when I go back to one of the I stay on this slide, it's maybe better. When I just remind you on our survey, the outcome of the survey, where NRI said they are looking for more collaboration, but it shouldn't be too time consuming, and they are looking of ways of doing intersessional work. The question is, what will be the intersessional work? We also discussed this right after Paris, and I think it was Andrea Bicalli saying, let's look at the call for issues, what comes out, and let's decide then on which topic we will try to do intersessional work this year. I must say we have tried this already in 2015 on the topic of net neutrality. We have set up an org team. Frederic Donk at that time was in the lead. It was a great team. We really had business involved, civil society, and they came up with a paper that was drafted collaboratively in the before EuroDIG, and it was hopefully to be kind of adopted at EuroDIG. You will still find that on our website. I can send the link so that you can see how the process went. We had commenting tools implemented in our website so that also others could join the org team. The results were difficult. We had a huge discussion at EuroDIG if to adopt, put the EuroDIG stamp on it. It was a bit discouraging, I must say. Also for Frederic, who put in so much effort, and then people in the room who felt we were not informed enough, we have not been involved because they might have missed an email or so, were objecting to this. It was a bit discouraging. It might have also been the wrong topic at that time. Net neutrality was a hot potato already at that time, and it was shortly before some legislation done by the Commission. So there were many organizations and individuals objecting to the topic, to the outcome, and to the process, that we stopped doing intersessional work after that. But now we see there is a constant demand for intersessional work. The question is, what is the topic? And we collected already some possible topics after the Paris IGF. One is the call for trust in cybersecurity, or let's put it in a broader sense, all the things that Macron brought up. You don't only have to look at this call, but you can look at it from a broader perspective. We can also understand intersessional work as something that formulates a reaction on another document. Just keep in mind the UN Digital Panel. Jovan Kurbalia is co-secretariat, and for instance, your minister, former President Doris Leuthäuser, she's also member of that panel. Jack Ma and Melinda Gates are chairing this panel. So they come up with their report end of May, beginning of June. And at EuroDIG, we have already a session, the keynote on day 2. So we could also try to formulate a reaction, a European reaction on this paper. That could be something, and we could of course also follow the process already before EuroDIG, because it's underway already. Another issue that could be looked in could be access and trust. It was at least trust, the overarching theme of the IGF 2018. That could also be a linking element from Paris to Berlin. Or we could also look, I think this proposal came from the Netherlands, artificial intelligence and internet governance, a European strategy, that we contribute to that strategy development. These are proposals. We might have now more ideas on intersessional work. Possibly it's a good idea if I just ask if there are more proposals. No, I don't have to ask. Giacomo has a comment.
Simply, I would remember what I said this morning. We need to link to the work for Berlin. It's for me, it's important that we do this in coordination with the Berlin, because this will give us more impact along all the line. So probably we will meet the guys of the IGF at the IGF prep meeting, open session in Geneva, and I suggest that we discuss with them, because it does make sense that we decide on our own alone.
That's a good point. On the other hand, EuroDIG is ahead of the IGF process. So actually we could also ask the MAG to look at the EuroDIG or CDIG session planning process and get some inspiration from there. So it could also work the other way around. That's something. Martin, do you have a comment?
On this, I think we can help set the Berlin agenda at this point in time. Timing is very good for that. I would hate to just talk about Paris. I would really like to see, so what do we take forward from that to Berlin?
There was a comment over here, Thomas, and okay.
Since I have the mic, I maybe start. First of all, thank you, Sandra, for this. Both is, I think, relevant, because the Paris call explicitly says that this issue should be rediscussed in Berlin at the next IGF. And of course, it's actually not a UN panel, it's the UN Secretary General's panel, which is a huge difference, because it's not a UN internal thing, it's a multi-stakeholder thing. That panel will issue its report in May. So EuroDIG is the first bigger conference that will look at this and hopefully discuss the recommendations, and can help prepare a global discussion, but can definitely help shaping a European understanding or reaction to the panel. And I fully agree with Giacomo, we should get in touch with the German organizers for the IGF, and to use both ways of influencing, mutually influencing the two conferences, and offer them as well that they can use the EuroDIG as a midway element of preparing the global IGF. I think there's lots of synergies, and the more we unite the discussions, although knowing that these are two separate processes but linked, I think that's helpful. So I would actually see that both the Paris call with the specific issues on focus on cybersecurity, but also the UN panel should somehow be worked with or about for EuroDIG. Thank you.
Is Wout, just to share my experience as a IGF Best Practice Forum secretary for the secretariat of the IGF. I am, because a lot of work goes on there, and it goes well or less well, it doesn't really matter. In the end, this is the end result of the group that worked together on the paper, and that paper as such, after a review, is put on the internet as the result of a best practice forum. And that would make it a little bit easier to make sure that the experience that Frederick has does not happen, because you don't have to agree on the end text. Everybody's context and contributions are in the text. and who didn't participate, don't participate. Then on the sort of topics, what I would also advocate is just to go back to one of the very first slides we saw, is that we had topics like the child abuse or harm on the internet. A lot of people are going to come there that have experience in their respective countries. And that is something which is a lot easier to process, because then you have best practices or examples that, for example, Hungary has, just a name, has a right whatever sort of regulation on it, or an advice or whatever, and Albania is trying to go into the subtopic. They don't have to reinvent the wheel, but they go and see what was done in Norway or Hungary or in Poland, and whatever they have come up with, they can copy and perhaps add something specific for their country. And that is something which, for all these topics here, probably the EuroDIG could actually be something which is very helpful to everybody, if you are able to collect all these best practices and regulations that are already around. And that is for others to learn from, and also outside of Europe they can learn from just by going through the website, because it will be there. And that is something which I think that all the different subjects here could actually contribute to, and then it's going to be a continuous process which ends at a logical place in time, and new topics come up, and from inventarization you go on to some sort of making sure that it's being published on, and use the best minds possible that are present in the room. And that's probably a way forward that would actually make intersessional work a lot more practical than the suggestions that are here. So, thank you.
I have some comments.
While I agree with Wout, I do think the best practice forum has some very valuable contributions. I can say from my experience over at the cybersecurity one, I do think throughout the years we're getting a grasp of the shape and how to deal with the best practice forum and how to see outputs. But I do think in the context of EuroDIG, and I'm just a newcomer here, but I do think that tying it up to the Paris call and to the UN Secretary General panel gives it a much more concrete way forward. I think the timing is also of the essence, instead of just trying to get a more general theme. And I don't know if I understood very well your message, Wout, but I do think it's more valuable for us to work with these two, particularly because in the context of the UN Secretary General panel, I think it might be interesting for us to, how can I say that? To actually get into the more local or the more regional approach or feedback, even if some of the community didn't actually follow the process, they will be aware of the process and they'll be able to react to it. So I do think it's kind of like a post and ex post feeding into the UNSG. But I do think it's a valuable process, and I do think it is better to be time and process bound rather than a general topic. And I don't know if you were saying something like that, but I do think that's more fruitful for the debates. My only question, which I don't know if we should talk about this now, is what we want to achieve for this in between the IGF and the previous IGF. With the Paris call, like what we want from the intersessional work on that. I don't know if that's a question we need to answer, if that's something that's relevant, because I can see a much more, a stronger way forward with the UNSG panel, because we already have a session on that with some of, I don't know if we're looking for the panelists or we're gonna have Jovan and other people talking about it, but I do think it's more clear on that side. But what about the Paris call? Maybe that's a question we might think about.
Me. Hello. Yeah, so two things. One would, hello, Adam. Two things. One was Berlin, which Thomas just mentioned. I think it would be a good idea, perhaps, if people agree that we somehow empower Sandra and Dutch hosts and so on to actually talk to the Germans and say, how can we add something to what you're doing, and reminding them that we are here, and I don't think anybody from Germany is here, but it would be quite nice that if we have a future process and they are formally invited to be part of EuroDIG and get involved with it, because we are the regional IG body. So that would be one thing to think about. But the other really about this intersessional work is we've seen a lot of things with dynamic coalitions as they've emerged over the years. And many of them are really pretty nebulous. They don't really do that much. They sort of have this sort of, we're going to work on dynamic coalition of something, something, something. So I think we ought to try and define what we're going to do, perhaps even try and charter the work so that we actually know what our work plan is. Otherwise, it will just be a discussion list, and at the end of it, somebody will write up a report. And I would look to actually chartering what we want to achieve. If it's to respond to the Paris call, then what is the Paris call and what are the issues that we're looking at? What's the timeline that we're going to achieve something by, and what's our output going to be? And the same for the UN panel. If we want to respond to that, then how are we going to do it? Otherwise, it will be, you know, again, a sort of open-ended, perhaps it will produce something that somebody rushes through 10 days before the deadline, but something that actually gives some structure to the thing that we're trying to achieve as intersessional work. I think the dynamic coalitions show we ought to do that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Wants one of these.
Try to summarize in two sentences. The first, I agree with Louise on what she said, but what I try to introduce is to make a sort of best practice forum set up to do this, because that gives you some framework, like Adam says, and it gives you an output that does not need to be agreed on by the whole of EuroDIG, but it's a process that has been going on, and this is the result. So I think that is what could actually work. And the other one I would try to say is that with all the topics you have, make sure that you go for some sort of output at the end of the workshop, so that there's a recommendation, learning, lessons learned, of best practices that are being shared. So there are two different sort of processes. Thank you.
On the Paris call, do we realize that there are 3 major countries who didn't sign this call? The US, Russia, and China. So my question is, are we going to give it a follow-up from a European perspective, or are we going to waste time, knowing that the US is not on board? And at least when we have the discussion at the IGF, the US will oppose, because they didn't sign this Paris call. Okay, let's continue then.
As was said this morning very clearly by our distinguished colleague, member of the parliament, Europe has a duty that the other 3 you mentioned, that they have not. So we have to go ahead, and then we've been waiting for so much, for so long, since 2003. The first IGF, the first World Summit of Information Society was in Geneva in 2003. 15 years is enough.
Maybe we need to go back to a more fundamental point. And what do we mean by intersessional work, and what should be the framework? I think we have some ideas what could be the substantive framework of it, linking it to the work of the panel, linking it potentially to the Paris call. We can also link it basically to the notion of cybersecurity in our sessions on cybersecurity at the EuroDIG, and make references to the elements of the Paris call. It does not necessarily have to be only about the Paris call, but the question is, what do we mean by intersessional work? Who is doing what, with what objective, in what form, and so on and so forth, and see whether we get to grips and agreement on something that is doable, feasible within our resources and timelines, and then take it from there. I'm not sure whether we are clear, at least I'm not necessarily fully clear on what we mean by intersessional work, and maybe we should try and distill this a little bit more clearer, if I may say so. Thank you.
Frederick, I was just going to ask you, maybe you share also some of the experiences, because you were leading the intersessional work a couple of years ago.
Well, what I was about to say is that if Thomas himself say that he has doubt about what it means in reality, then I believe it's a good signal for us to think very carefully about what we want. I agree with you, Thomas. I mean, it's still ill-defined. And I believe that the objective of this network neutrality group was a good experience, but it was also ill-defined. We didn't actually discuss as we are doing here. It was something that we tried to achieve, and it went wrong at the end. And again, a good experience because we saw the community reacting, which is also very good. But you're right, it was not very well defined, so the objectives were not very well defined. And the condition in which we could actually propose something, it was indeed not something we should have obtained unanimity, it was clear, was not very well defined. So I would not necessarily copy the wording and the vocabulary of the IGF in this case. We should not be driven by this. I agree that the intention is to ensure that there is something between the EuroDIGs to show that we continue to work. But it doesn't necessarily mean we need to implement intersessional, whatever it means, kind of process. What I would believe is that there might just be a bit like dynamic coalitions, dynamic EuroDIG coalitions that might still work on an informal basis to just continue discussing and preparing the next. It's just something that I make up right now, but I believe that the intention, Sandra, behind your proposal was much more to make sure that there are links between the EuroDIG. Maybe let's build something on this.
Could you just pass the mic?
Thank you. For me, it's quite clear what means intersessional work. If we are coherent with all the reflection we have done all along these years. The Paris call, as you remember, was Macron saying, we will regulate, but we don't want to regulate alone. We want to discuss with you first. So it means that they want to know from the other stakeholders, the civil society, the business, etc., what regulating what, which are the things that need to be regulated, and on which basis. This is exactly what the added value of a multi-stakeholder arena like the EuroDIG is and the IGF is, could bring to the process. We can bring what the civil society, what the industry, what the technical community needs out of it. This is very simple in theory. Then, of course, there are a lot of difficulties. And we can explore the path to bring some conclusions that are multi-stakeholder, not necessarily validated, but at least tested. You see, like in Net Mundial. In Net Mundial, we discussed very hard topics, and we see where was possible to go ahead, where we were stuck, and which were the different points of view, and was very useful. Then nobody follow up on that, but at least we hope that this time somebody will follow on that.
Thomas?
Thank you. I think this was a very helpful contribution. Maybe we do not have to necessarily understand intersessional work in creating a huge separate process. We can actually use the discussions at EuroDIG themselves and the messages that we'll formulate as something that we will then formally send to Macron or to whoever is the letterbox of the Paris call as the result of the EuroDIG discussions around cybersecurity, and maybe also send the messages to the panel or to I don't know whom as a reflection of the European stakeholders on the issues raised or the recommendations formulated in the report. That's, let's say, the minimal variant or the minimal option that is already has a value in itself. If we have the resources and if we are willing, we could complement this with a preceding that would need to be communicated with a preceding element of using the wiki or using some kind of collaborative tools to pre-formulate, try to pre-shape before the 90 minutes or 60 minutes discussion at EuroDIG to collect some European visions and views, and then use this as an input for the testing, validating discussion at EuroDIG on some of the key elements. that is something that may not then be a text, but that it may still be the messages coming out of EuroDIG that we would use as the text, as a not a formal negotiated text, but as a time or a temperature temperaturmesser, as a degree of whatever you call it, like a temperature of the room document, but having it preceded, if there's willingness and somebody that would want to lead such a process by a pre-discussion, pre-event discussion that would then accumulate in the EuroDIG event itself. Maybe something along these lines might be feasible at the same time as useful.
Sorry for talking this much, but some of us do. I've last year ran into an organization that actually has an online platform to discuss matters like this. And it means that something is open for 3 weeks or for 4 weeks, and people get presented a few questions on the topic. They can respond to it in their own time over the 4 weeks, but can also monitor who else is responding, and then they can respond to themselves. And the unique thing is that they take that out, present some sort of a report, and then do a physical session, for example, at EuroDIG, where everything comes together and they decide on the outcomes. But everybody knows exactly what the other's point of view is. They discuss it among each other, and that makes the discussion in the room a whole lot easier to do. Of course, that costs some money, but what I understand is it's not tons of money. It's in the something in the 10,000 something.
Plus resources to run it.
Right, it takes resources to run it, but I've seen it work, and it works a miracle. So that's something I could introduce you to. But that means that what the organization has to do is formulate the right questions together with the organization running the platform. And that means that everybody gets the same question in the same time frame. And everybody who did not participate, well, they're sort of too late. You had your opportunity for a month, and after that month, the discussion is closed until we get to EuroDIG itself. And then you have some sort of an outcome, which is probably pretty good to foresee at the end of the closure of the online. So if that's an idea, I can introduce you to the guy, and he can show you probably online what he does. And for the rest, it has nothing to do with me. It's just something I ran into. And IGF is contemplating it at the next MEG meeting to see if it's possible to do something with them.
On the platform matter, I can just say Wiki is one collaboration tool we have, but we also have a WordPress tool where you can put on a document and then comment on it. So that's no miracle, as you said. That can be done. I think the most difficult part here is to chase after people, to run after them, because if you just pull out a question or the document and say, now you have 4 weeks, you will get not much. You really have to engage with them. And it shouldn't be too time consuming, because for many national and regional IGFs, it's either on top of the job or voluntary work. And that makes it sometimes so difficult then to fulfill the wishes. Although there is the wish to fulfill intersessional work, look at it as with ICANN or at the IGF. Usually the sessions are organized in the very last moment, although people know that weeks, months before. But no, Andrea was next, right?
Yes, thank you. I think this is not the time to be shy as a EuroDIG community, and we've been discussing that for some time. We have a unique situation where we have a very committed host. I think the most committed host that EuroDIG has ever had, that participates, that is engaged, that has knowledge on that. We have the commitment from a president of a large country, Macron, who came there and said, I don't want to regulate, I want you to help me, but otherwise I'll do it. And then we will have the Germans. So we cannot miss this opportunity. And we have, every one of us had some exposure to a multi-stakeholder, from the ICANN transition into all the people that are involved or following now the discussion within ICANN on how to respond to the WHOIS and GDPR. That actually is a perfect case. ICANN has been mumbling around WHOIS for years, until when a law comes around and suddenly they have to do the work, and they have 1 year to do the work. And now there is a working group trying to meet this deadline. we are in a similar situation. We have to put ourselves a deadline. We have to stop just, brainstorming about titles, but actually taking examples of what exists already. So online tools, we have the topics, call for volunteers, and at the end, if anything comes out, if we don't agree on anything, well, we tried. But maybe we can come around with a message that is endorsed by the chair or the host, which in this case is the Dutch government. And that has a weight, and that's something that is unprecedented. And we have seen that it worked to a certain extent with Net Mundial, the role of the host. We know all the pitfalls of that. We just have to, to be bold and to learn from that, narrow it down and make the work and start as soon as possible. Otherwise, we will end up, again, finding ourselves, figuring out which title is the best, and then we decide. And when you go back and say, no, we don't like it anymore. It's not a good way forward.
I must say, for me, it's not really clear on what kind of issue we are going to work. I mean, platform, sending out calls, starting now, that's all fine. But on which topic? Oh, there are hands are going up. Marie, Nadia, and Giacomo.
Hi. So I don't know. I think I agree with Thomas on the idea of if we're minimizing risks and overload and trying to mobilize, I don't know how many volunteers to commit to doing extra work or engaging in working groups or whatever structure, we think it's interesting. I do think that a good way is to actually get the reports or try to assemble parts of the reports and write a final document and circulate in the community and see if I don't know if that would be interesting. However, I do think it is. The only thing that I would raise in this case, and I still think both of the UN panel and the Paris call would be interesting, is to ensure that we have a language that meets these two processes. I do think that is important, because if you're dialoguing, if you want to contribute something to the Paris call, or you're talking about, we have different panels or different potential sessions that talk about attribution, that talk about evidence, things that are being raised in the Paris call, for example, and rights and security, balancing both of these. So I do think the only challenge in this case, if we're going for a low risk kind of approach, would be to ensure that we have a consistency of language until the end, so that we can actually dialogue or send it to the mailbox of whoever mailbox we want to send in the end. Just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Just wanted to, last year, my name is Nadia from Youth Coalition Internet Governance, and last year I was the focal point for PL2, and after I held that session, I actually submitted a proposal to the IGF based on my session, supported by EuroDIG, to actually move further with the topic and expand on it. It was half accepted, so my proposal was joint, because I had a speaker from EuroDIG, EuroDIG in this case, because he was the subject matter expert and presenting then the topic. I had someone from CDIG, I had someone from Africa from the Digital Grassroots Project, but I didn't have someone from Asia, and I didn't have someone from the Pacific region. So I think, if we are having for example, the plenary topics, and we wanted to do more engagement, whether that's, I know that for EuroDIG last year, they were encouraged to join sessions as participants, and if they wanted to continue and use EuroDIG as a learning platform and then go to the IGF and actually present something, that might be a really great opportunity for us to continue the engagement of the youth that we're now investing in to come to these sessions. And so if you're talking about volunteers, and also at the time, the people who were part of PL2, more than half of them actually attended the IGF themselves. So a lot of them also continued their support that if we had our session, that we would move forward. In the end, because we were a joint session, my co-hosts had higher level speakers, so ministries, so we didn't end up doing kind of a EuroDIG, CDIG digital grassroots collaboration. But if this is something that would be interested in, and we want to take one of these topics further, this might be something that we could discuss and see if we then can get all the groups involved and bring that to the IGF that way.
Next was Giacomo and then Thomas.
Thank you. I think that this has to be a collaborative process. We are talking, when we talk about intersessional work, a collaborative process. So collaborative process for me means who is before us on the chain and who will be the next. So it's not a reflection that we have to do on our own. I think that we need to talk with the organizer of the Paris IGF, we need to talk with the high-level panel, and we need to talk with the IGF Berlin. The questions that are relevant for them are the one in which we can be more relevant for all the process. Then if we have some specific issues that are not common to them and that are very important for us, then we can add. But the one that can be more beneficiaries are the questions to which they are looking for answers, because we can help in bringing the answer to the questions. So I made an example concrete for Paris. They say that they want to regulate. They need to know from the multi-stakeholder perspective what is available to regulate and what is not, where is better not to regulate. This is already something, but we need to involve the Paris people to know if they are on board with us, if they are still on this line or not. And the same we need to do with the other at the end of the process, and with the IGF ideally, but the global IGF is a lot more complicated than the others. I would stay to those from which we can get clear answers, while from the IGF global, you know, that is always complicated to get any kind of answer.
Just to mention, the people behind the Paris call, it was said by the German future host that this is actually a foreign ministerial process, or the Paris call is based on a process of foreign ministers. So,
well, two things. One, Giacomo, you may be mixing up what Macron has said in his speech about we need to regulate the internet in order to keep it free and open and safe and everything with the Paris call. This is not exactly 100% the same. I've been looking at the Paris call, and I mean, if you look at the second page, that about 10 bullets, it's quite specific. I'm not really sure to what extent we can precisely, let's say, answer the Paris call, and then in the end it says let's continue the discussion in Berlin. What we may do with the Paris call is maybe make a reference to it in the setting up of the whole conference, and brief those who deal with this more specifically with the cybersecurity part, that they make a reference in the discussions to the call, and that we try to reflect, let's say, in the stock taking or in the messages that we send from EuroDIG to the IGF and to whoever reads it, that we see like, okay, where are we now with these issues, where with the bullets? I'm not sure whether this is actually in the end going to work in a written collaborative, working on a text-based document in the run-up to the EuroDIG. With the UN panel, the situation is different in two ways. One is we don't know yet what the outcome will be of that panel. So we can't say now what we are supposed to discuss, because that doesn't exist. What we know, on the other hand, and that makes it easier, is we know somewhere end of April, early May, there will be a document containing recommendations. So what we could do, and this is what I would suggest to you to think about, what we could do is we could take a decision that we intend to provide for a month time, let's say from mid May to when the thing will be public, to mid or early June, like before the EuroDIG, will provide for a discussion space, a written discussion space on the specific recommendations of the panel, which we don't know yet, but they will be there. Let's give each other a month time to all European stakeholders to look and discuss, because then it's got the questions. We don't have to formulate the questions because the recommendations will kind of be the questions, and use the EuroDIG to comment on the recommendations until a few days before the event, and then somebody, the secretariat or the Geneva Internet Platform, or somebody could do a synthesis paper of the feedback of the discussion, and that could be a background and input document for the discussion at EuroDIG, and we'll have some messages that we could then publish as the EuroDIG discussion on the recommendations of the panel. This is something, and then maybe the Dutch could give their chapeau to it and say, we are the host of the meeting that discussed the recommendations of the panel. This is what the European community thinks of these recommendations. That would be a document, a non-negotiated document reflecting the discussion. That is something that I would say would be fairly easy in terms of setting up, taking resources, providing for a monthly space to discuss this online, and then have a physical discussion at the meeting, and then putting this on a paper and publishing it on the EuroDIG website. The only thing we would need to do is we would need to communicate now or at the IGF consultation, say the EuroDIG community discussed this and they intend to do a discussion of the panel's recommendations 1 month before the EuroDIG at the EuroDIG, and then communicate the result of the discussion via the Dutch host. That would be a concrete proposal that listening to this comes to my mind, which may be feasible if we have somebody who says, okay, I'm responsible for running this. I don't know, Sandra, whether the Secretariat has the resources or whether you would need some time to check whether you get a team together, that maybe together with the Dutch host, or I don't know whom, or Diplo, Geneva Internet Platform. That may be something feasible, but we need to reduce it to something that is manageable and fits in the timeline. Thank you.
So, Chris Buckridge, RAP NCC. I just want to basically second that. I think this is really a good example of low-hanging fruit where there is an open call, and using EuroDIG to actually facilitate people responding to that call for responses is a really smart way of doing it. It also ties into other processes, which is nice. I don't think there needs to be much. I mean, we're already going to have Diplo providing written reports on sessions at EuroDIG, so this wouldn't be anything beyond what they're already doing. I think we would need to reflect it, well, we would need to highlight it in advance, as you say, at the session, but also incorporate this into the program. So I think it would involve a further iteration of the program. But I think this is a much more achievable and useful way to look at what EuroDIG can have as an output. So yeah, second that.
And Frederic?
Sorry, here. Oui, merci. I do too. I like this very much. And I was looking actually at the host when we were talking about this. We might catch two birds with one stone. We are struggling to find EuroDIG this year a title, but actually it might well be from Paris to Berlin. I mean, it's just what it's gonna be. I mean, you are positioning yourself as a unique transition or bridge between Paris and Berlin. I mean, we might just catch two birds with one stone. All I want to say.
I think that's a very good idea, and I just got a title in my mind. What do you think about digital cooperation from Paris to Berlin? Take Berlin. First we take. One thing I would like to share with you, that I was talking to one UN official, Mr. Schweinfest in Paris, and I was at that time already mentioning that we should look at the report from the UN panel a little bit more in detail in EuroDIG, and he was very much in favor of this, because he said, yes, you have to make sure, you, the community, that this does not land just in a desk and is not recognized. So actually also from a UN level, there would be a great interest in massaging this report, looking into it, and doing something with it. So do I have the feeling that we have kind of consensus in this room? We do intersessional work, and we will work on this, we will comment on this report that comes out of the panel for digital cooperation, and we will afterwards send out a message or a recommendation or a view from the European community. I think If there are no objections, then I take this. Olivier, do you have an objection or do you want to agree?
I have to. I would like to comment on the process here, because when we started speaking about intersessional work, you might have noticed, a few of you, I started walking back and forth trying to look for volunteers, and I haven't found any volunteers to do intersessional work, as in a wide range of things. So when it came down to what Thomas was saying and focusing something on the Paris call, then I started getting a little warmer with regards to this. But I do have a question, though. What would... What? Yeah, the report. But the question is, what would we market this answer as being from? In other words, is this from the EuroDIG community? Is it from the European IGF, national European IGF community? Are we trying to coordinate European IGFs? Or are we saying this is just the EuroDIG community, irrespective of what the different national IGFs might be wishing to contribute?
Well, this is all being born as we speak. But I would say it is the EuroDIG comments on the recommendations of the report. If we announce this as a decision that we intend to do this in Geneva at the 28th, we may incite other IGF structures worldwide to actually do the same. That may all culminate in a discussion in Berlin. So it may trigger some other thoughts, but we can, in order to not to over-engineer and overstretch us, I would call it a EuroDIG reflections or whatever on the recommendations of the panel.
EuroDIG,
as simple as
EuroDIG community there. So
call it EuroDIG community. What is EuroDIG? EuroDIG is not Sandra and me and you.
Well,
it's the community, but we can call it the EuroDIG community or the European, whatever you call it. But in the end, it's what the EuroDIG structure can offer. Whoever wants to reflect in that framework does it. That's what I would propose.
Okay.
Don't over-engineer it.
Well, the reason why I asked this question is just regarding who walks on whose patch of grass. Now, I don't think that EuroDIG has ever said that it was the voice of national IGFs in Europe. Never. Yeah. So whatever we say, it's going to be worded and crafted quite carefully so as to not make it sound like we are representing the national IGFs in Europe, which we're not. So that's it. Thank you.
But national IGFs will be the biggest source for the network to work on this, as well as it is open to anyone else to.
But many of them will want to submit comments directly as well. So
yeah, they can do.
The thing.
But that will be possible. So let's talk about. I think we have a conclusion here.
Just 1 second. What's his name? Shit, I get old. Olivier. There is no letterbox yet to comment on. That is the process. The follow-up process on the panel doesn't exist. The only thing we do is we provide for some space to discuss it in The Hague, and then publish a document to whoever wants to read it. We don't even have an address apart from the UN Secretary General's to send it to, but we'll just do it.
So it will result in an open letter, basically. Okay.
And by the way, to conclude on this issue, and I'm very happy that we have found a conclusion, the first has already a drink in his hand, and Daphne will have some housekeeping notes now. We still have to find the overarching team, since we agree that we would like to have an overarching team. Let's get a drink and discuss this further, but first let's ask Daphne what the housekeeping notes are. How long can we stay here? And
we can only stay longer if it's we have to pay more as well.
Okay, then we have 30 minutes to have 2 drinks and to decide on the team.
And also the live stream, they wanted to maybe leave at 6 as well. So
Okay, and also live stream people will finish their work at 6 o'clock. So we really have not much time. I would propose everyone goes out, gets a drink. Now we meet here in 15 minutes, and then I hope we have some catchy ideas for the... In 5 minutes. Okay, so get 2 drinks and meet in... No.
We can stay a little bit longer. There's no problem, no haste. Stay and work on this. So enjoy your drinks. But before leaving this room, I would like to thank you in particular, Sandra and Thomas, by their outstanding work leading us throughout the day. And of course, also a big thank you to you here in the room and to our remote participants. For,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
finalizing
We would
this.
need to, of course, thank the Dutch hosts as well, because they are an enormously. And it's not true that the previous hosts were not ambitious and not committed. So this is not a ranking. We just love them this year like no one else before, like we loved all the others the years before. But just to say thank you to Arnold and his team.
Great, and now up to the rings, eh? Great.
Please sit down or stay standing, remain standing, but turn to the crowd again, not to me, to the crowd again. We need to agree on a title. This is what we are paid for. This is our job. This is the most important thing of this meeting. We need to have a title, a theme. We have had a new discussion thread about starting with the proposal digital cooperation from Paris to Berlin. Then people realized that maybe not everybody is aware what Paris and Berlin refers to, i.e. not everybody is aware of that this refers to the IGF venues. There were some proposals to eliminate the word digital of this, and then what we've heard is another proposal now that would call cooperation the right way. This is the proposal that should be the basis of a hopefully not too long discussion. Okay. Is this it? The right way? My only comment is that this implies that we know what the right way is. Shouldn't we call it cooperation? What is the right way? In order not to pretend that we know the solution of everything, or do you think we should pretend to know the solution of everything?
Cooperation is the right way to get to the solution.
So you want to leave it as it is, or do you want to turn the right way into what is the right way with a question mark? Want to leave it as it is? Okay. Any fundamental objections? To adopt the title, my dear. Okay, honey. So you have no objections. Okay. So this is it. This is the title of this year's EuroDIG. Thank you all. Thanks, Michael. Okay, that's it. That means the meeting is over. Is that right?
So the meeting is finished with that, and I would really thank you also in the name of the host for coming here, for being active, and making this a really, really good meeting. I must say one of the best planning meetings we ever had. Thanks to your participation and preparation. That's chapeau to all of you. Thank you.